All right. First, I applaud you for actually showing up when all your friends are out having drinks and dinner, so thank you for that. First Church of Christ Scientist, Christian Science Monitor. Who's heard of it? Has anybody actually visited? Okay. I suggest perhaps the next time you're in Boston to take a visit. The organization is really two parts. There's the church itself, which is a faith-based nonprofit, about 556 employees. We have 1,800 branches and societies around the world, members in about 130 different countries. The other side of the organization is the one that most people know, which is the Christian Science Monitor. Well-regarded international media organization, and then 7 Pulitzer Prizes and various awards. So again, if you haven't checked out the website, csmonitor.com. We run about 170 servers. 70 servers are virtualized, the rest are physical. Primary OS is Microsoft Server 2008 and Red Hat, although we do have a smattering of Sun and a couple of other OSs. We have a 15 terabyte SAN, a pair of 100 meg connections to the internet, Metro grade Ethernet, and our offsite storage is Iron Mountain. So why cloud? Why now? Well, in order to do that, I'm going to tell you a small story about the organization. We go back to 2006. I've got 400 servers. I've got 100 people. $17 million budget. We are cranky, and we're doing it in-house. Because we like it that way. That's how we roll. There's no need to do cloud here. Because we are hip and we are happening, and we're a church. Well, 2011, not so good. In an organization where your budget is built on one of two things. On the nonprofit side, it's built by generous donations from people. On the publishing side, it's built from subscriptions, it's built from ad sales, it's built from a lot of the traditional things that a traditional media company would use. So when the economy starts to take a hit, when members start to decide they no longer want to be members, that has a direct impact on your budgets. So downward trend, it's obviously unsustainable to continue. And quite honestly, if it wasn't for this trend, we probably wouldn't be talking about cloud today. So what more can we do? We've cut dollars. We've cut people. How about if we look to change what we do? Because in those 6 years, the activities of the organization didn't change. So now we need to look at not only changing what we do, but how we actually do it. We already had a good start. For the last several years, we've been using Amazon's EC2 for development instances. We moved the organization off of Exchange to Google Apps and Google Docs to try to reduce costs there. We moved arguably the only Tier 1 application that the organization has off to Oracle as part of their on-demand. So they're hosted out of their data center. The only thing we do is manage the configuration and the data within the application itself. We've moved to Salesforce more as a development platform to take the literally thousands of FileMaker databases that over the years were really easy for Bob sitting at his desk to create until they became critical mass. And then it was difficult to maintain that data. So we've been moving that onto a platform that's supportable. And then applications like Replicon for time tracking. At this point, what else can we do? What else can we look at in the organization that we can leverage the benefits that we got from what we did in the cloud already? And so unstructured data and volume data, when we looked at our file shares, we saw some interesting things there. Not that we didn't know about them, but now we're looking at them with a critical eye. So in the organization, those 556 employees, they basically have 2 mapped drives on their desktop. They have an S drive and a P drive. I know, very original. The S drive is a shared drive. It basically has a listing, a directory for every department with file permissions on top of it so they can access what they need to access. The P drive is each individual employee's personal drive. It gets mounted based on login scripts. So when we looked at some of that data, you can see some of the numbers here. We're looking at 2+ terabytes, and the last 2 bullets are the ones that really, you look at the amount of money that you pay to replicate this data, to back it up over and over and over again. And you're looking at 73% of the data that hasn't been accessed for at least a year. So we started looking at unstructured data and said, you know what? This is pretty good. We should take a look at what we can do with this. Once we decided that was the case, we needed to put together our requirements for how we were now going to move forward. So, like everyone else, we want to continually move from CapEx to OpEx, reduce the need for expensive resources. As you saw on the previous slide, we have a 15 terabyte fiber channel SAN. And with any type of technologies like that, you got to have the fiber channel guy, the HVA guy. That costs money. It's not that we're looking to get rid of people, but if you saw some of the numbers before, it's obvious that we need to make some changes. The other interesting thing is the departmental usage-based billing. So every department gets cross-charged for the infrastructure of the organization. Now I have to tell you, it's black magic some days. And they'll look at their billing and they'll say, "You charging me how much?" It's particularly bad when you have a shared server between two departments using an application. They're sharing the cost 50-50, and one of them says, "I no longer want to use it." Because you go to the other guy and go, "You owe me money." They're not happy with that. Part of what we wanted to move to was a model that when we're managing that unstructured data, we wanted to be able, in a fairly accurate manner, to be able to literally show them the bill and say, "This is what you owe me plus a convenience fee." In the last bullet, what do we put in place to handle this unstructured data that has a high user adoption rate but frictionless access? Meaning that when we implement this, whether or not we tell the users that, guess what, you're now in the cloud, we want them to sit down at their desks, we want them to see an S drive and a P drive, and we want them to continue operating as far as they know exactly the way they operate. And so they showed me their spreadsheet and they had some of their requirements, that's good. And then I saw some of the things that they were looking at. They had, Dropbox, they had Box.net, had some Jungle Disk in there. And so the first question I asked is, hey, somebody raise a hand. Who's going to go hit every desktop to deploy these things? And oh, by the way, where are your encryption keys? Because they're not going to be in your pocket. I know you want to reduce CapEx, but you need a piece of hardware. It's a bridge between the local application servers and cloud service providers. Pretty straightforward. Once we agreed that we were going to put in a piece of hardware, this gateway, then we had to sit down and do the analysis and figure out what are the metrics, what are the requirements for what we wanted to put in place. And so I went through, along with the business analysts and the project managers, and we basically looked at the industry, and we looked at what we were trying to do, and we put together requirements based on what we believed we needed to move forward, because this is what other companies have done, and heck, if it's good enough for somebody else, it's good enough for this organization. Something fully redundant. Encryption. Although we are a church and a nonprofit, we fall under the purview of PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, and being in the state of Massachusetts, they have one of the most restrictive personal information policies in their books. Local performance was another one that came from our systems engineers. We're going to move from a fiber channel SAN to something that's iSCSI. It's not going to work. How am I going to access my Access databases off the S drive? And so that became a requirement, along with having something that was solid state enabled. And then, of course, the last one, ease of use, centralized management. I mean, again, we're coming from a complex environment. We want to make sure that whatever we put in place to take us to the next, X number of years is easy to use. As I said, we went through the cloud gateway providers, took a look at what they were doing. We spoke to a bunch of people. We looked at all the case studies. I spoke to some of the VCs that are funding some of these companies. And out of all that, based on our requirements, we decided to go with StorSimple. And this is a short 6 bullet points, as I think are the highlights to why we thought this would be the solution for us and felt comfortable about it. The first one is the whole category of cloud integrated enterprise storage. This idea that we're not talking about a cache here, right? We're talking about a device that has full authority over every byte that goes in and out of the cloud. It's got full control. It's not toss it over, cache it, and it's done. Very important if you look for something like this for yourselves. The VMware Ready and the Microsoft certification, the VMware Ready in particular, was pretty big for us because we've got mission-critical apps that are running in VMware that are back-ended by that FC SAN. We wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything we were missing in terms of not only migrating the applications on there to be able to run out of in a StorSimple environment, but also the VMDKs. As I said, well-funded by VCs. For our use case, for the requirements that I showed you, we felt they had the best combination of features and price. The last 2 points have been both 2 of my pet peeves and 2 of the things that I love about working in technology and with vendors. Savvy, articulate client engineering team. There's an engineering team that when they came in and we basically said, look, these are the problems we're trying to solve. You guys tell us what we should do. The last one is also something that as an organization that has been very beneficial for us. The idea that you get value before purchase from your vendors. What do I mean by that? In this particular engagement, when we called and we asked questions, before we engaged any further, it was, hey, can I talk to you? I got a bunch of other questions, a bunch of engineers. They accommodated us full swing. There was no talk about price. There was no talk about how many. There was no talk about end of quarter or anything else. And so I felt that after those engagements, again, before purchase, before there are any invoices or anything else, that if the organization had not moved forward with this, that I was better informed about what cloud gateways, what integrated cloud storage means than I was before those discussions. And to me, that equals partnership. When we decided to do a proof of concept, the one other thing I'll add is, because of the size of the organization, we are not an organization that does a couple of proof of concepts and says, we don't want this one, want this one, want this one. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so it puts extra pressure on us to make sure that we understand what this technology does, that we speak to enough people, that we do enough research, so by the time we hit the proof of concept stage, we know that if, short of something that we never predicted happening on the bad side, that we're going to go to a purchase. So our proof of concept was basically, we wanted to use the StorSimple 5020. The 5020 is on the low end. It has 2 terabytes of usable space, and you can manage up to 100 terabytes through the device. We decided to use Amazon's S3 with multiple regions. And again, we chose the standard region, the Northeast region, and we chose US West for the clones. The equivalent of your truly independent DR tape copies. We took a 2 terabyte data set from actual data out of those SMP drives that we're actually going to move into that environment when went to production. We stood up a clustered pair of VMware virtual file servers running Windows 2008. If you remember in the earlier slide, we have a pair of 100 meg connections to the internet, but what we wanted to test was the quality of service configuration in StorSimple, which is pretty nice if you're worried that all of a sudden nobody's going to be able to get to your network because StorSimple is doing all of its magic on the back end. So we purposely set that to 20 megs per second limit, and we set it outside of 8 in the morning and 5 at night. And then the other thing that we're doing is that we're using multiple cloud accounts. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 individual S3 accounts. The reason we did that is because part of my comment about the departmental cross-charging is that on that S drive where you have those 30 folders, every department is going to get a cloud account assigned. And we're going to present those mount points under a single drive letter. The difference now is that when I get my consolidated AWS report every month, I can actually go down and say, Legal is using 50 gigs in the cloud. Here's your cost. And then on top of that, I'll add some cost, what I jokingly call the convenience fee, for the burden of actually having the StorSimple. And so the combination of those becomes far more accurate and covers all the tiers: primary data, archiving, backups, snapshots, and tape for that one loaded cost. The appliance setup was 30 minutes. Actually, the only reason it took 30 minutes, no joke, is because when we got to the part of the setup that said, give it an encryption passphrase, nobody could come up with a good one. And so literally the encryption passphrase at about minute 25, and I said, we got to actually move forward and set this up, was, we don't have a better password, exclamation point, because we believe in security. After 2 weeks, we decided, you know what, we've seen what we needed to see. We moved forward with, we started the process of procurement, but we left the setup running for another 2 weeks. So we essentially got a month's worth of testing through this. We got some dedupe numbers that were interesting, and trust me, I was the first one to go in there and go, what's my dedupe ratio, because that sounds cool. Our overall dedupe was 12.5. Now by overall I mean, remember what we had in the StorSimple at this point was all of the actual volume data, but we're also doing snapshots. We also had the VMware, the VMDKs, everything else going through StorSimple. So across all of that data, 12.5. If we break it down and we look at the actual volume data, we were at about 3.5. And I suspect we're going to get better than that just based on the data set that we were using for testing. Obviously, unstructured data, you're talking everything from Word to spreadsheets to Access to image files and so forth. Your dedupe is going to vary. So when we looked at the numbers, the data that actually was tiered to Amazon for this proof of concept was 285 gigs. Remember, we started with 2 terabytes. And so our Amazon cost for the proof of concept was about $300. When we actually set this up, we created a new mount point. We created a T drive and a U drive, and we picked a bunch of users in the organization. We picked people in the monitor, and we picked people on the church. And we basically said that between 2 o'clock and 2:15 or 2:30 this particular date, and we want you to open up a spreadsheet. We want you to run a video file. We want you to open up an Access database. We want you to drive some amount of traffic. While they were doing that, we were pulling cables on the back end. So we basically did a storage processor failover. We did a file cluster failover. We pulled the power supplies. The failover is literally, a second. You'll notice maybe an extra spinning, the beach ball that you'll see on a Mac, and you're good to go. It's no different than the type of hiccup that anyone would see surfing the web on a daily basis when your internet connection takes a hit or hits a spike. These are as close to accurate as I can put together with the finance people, is going from $1 plus per gig to under 25 cents. Once this is set up, we're going to move the administration. All of that is moving to the service desk. Because again, what we want to do is we want to move this activity from the expensive resources, the guys that are tied up doing things only because they're the ones that had access or because it was esoteric enough where the guys in the service desk couldn't handle it. We now have an interface and a setup that easily could be handled from the service desk. Which also means that when you have a user that calls up and makes a request, today the ticket comes in, it has to be sent over to the systems guys, it goes into their queue, when somebody's available, the restore happens. Now we can basically have that back and restored within 15 minutes. And the 15 minutes, again, quite honestly, is because somebody's got to put it in their queue and somebody's not sitting at their desk, so there's some amount of time. The restore itself for something like that is just about instantaneous. Because what you do is you take one of your snapshots. Our snapshots, by the way, local snapshots of the device, we're going to run them every 2 hours. So every 2 hours we're going to snap that data to the local device. At the end of the day, we're going to snap for the day out to the cloud, and then depending on how the rest of the retention schedule happens is we'll run multiple local cloud snaps, and then obviously the clones that will be sent out to the US West region of Amazon. The existing SAN infrastructure, the SAN, the VTL, the tape library, all gets decommissioned. We're going to have both devices active. One is going to handle all the virtual environments. It's going to handle the VMDKs, all the mounted storage and so forth, purely for VMware. It'll also have its own cloud account, so we can separate our VMware costs in terms of the cloud as opposed to everything else. And then the second 5020 is going to handle the volume data from various servers in the organizations, app servers, file servers, and so forth. The beauty of this hardware is that there's a configuration file that you can actually download that contains the metadata. You take that configuration file from one device, you place it on the second device, so that now you have a piece of hardware that has two configuration files, and it basically takes over both boxes, the activity of both boxes. And we can still leverage a situation where we have a complete failure of one device or the other. When you understand what something like this device is capable of doing, when you understand your own environment, then it really starts to open up a world of possibilities in asking yourself, this is pretty good, what else can I do? That's the end of my presentation. I would only again suggest that if you're interested, have the discussion with these guys. Definitely try to get a proof of concept going, but at least see if you can get your hands on it, because it's a much different experience than actually just reading the press or looking through the spec sheet and trying to make a determination. So again, thank you very much. I hope it was informative, and I enjoyed the rest of the show.